The unexpected war, the ground shook as alien ships dropped from the sky like falling stars. Buildings crumbled, people screamed, and smoke filled the air. The invasion of Earth had begun without warning, without mercy, and leading the charge was General Varexa, the most feared warrior in the Zelthari Empire. She stood tall above her army, armored in black and silver, with piercing violet eyes that saw weakness instantly. Her long, ridged tail swept behind her, and her sharp fangs flashed as she gave the command to advance. The humans resisted bravely, but their weapons were weak against the alien technology. Earth's cities fell one by one, and hope faded like dust in the wind. But in the ruins of New Seattle, something strange happened. A small group of survivors had not run, not screamed. They had set up a shelter in the burned-out remains of a hospital. And among them was a man with blood on his hands, not from battle, but from healing. His name was Elias, a young human doctor with no weapon, no armor, and no military rank. He had been separated from his team during the first wave of attacks, but instead of hiding, he had stayed behind to help the injured, human or alien. He didn't care if someone was bleeding, he stopped it. When Varexa's patrols entered the area, they expected to find soldiers instead. They found Elias kneeling beside one of their wounded, a massive Zelthari warrior who had been crushed by falling debris. Elias was pressing a cloth to the creature's chest, speaking calmly. "Stay still, don't move. Your lung is punctured," he said softly. The alien bared his fangs in pain, but didn't strike. He could feel the human trying to help, and in that moment, instinct told him to listen. Varexa arrived moments later, her boots stomping into the rubble. Her guards raised their weapons, ready to fire, but she raised her hand. Stopping them, she looked at Elias, confused, curious, almost amused. "What are you doing, human?" she asked, voice cold as ice. "I'm keeping him alive," Elias answered, without fear. "That's what I do." "You are supposed to fight or run," she said. Stepping closer, "Why are you helping your enemy?" "Because he's hurt," Elias replied. "And I'm a doctor, not a killer." Varexa narrowed her eyes, unsure how to respond. She had fought in over 100 battles, crushed rebellions, wiped out colonies, but never had she met someone who helped her people without expecting anything in return. "You risk your life to save one of mine," she said slowly. "Do you think that makes you safe?" "No," Elias said, still pressing the cloth to the wound. "But maybe it makes me human." That word human hit her like a silent blow. Not because of what he said, but how he said it. There was no fear in his voice, no hatred, no anger. Just calm, steady warmth, like the kind her people forgot long ago. Behind her, her soldiers watched in silence. They were trained to destroy, to obey, but they too had never seen kindness from a human before. It made them hesitate, just for a second, but it was enough. Varexa looked around the broken hospital walls. There were injured humans, 2 children, elders, all barely breathing. And Elias moved from one to another, checking their wounds, whispering comfort. He didn't stop, not even when she stepped closer. Towering over him, "You're wasting your time," she said. "These people will die when the city falls. Then I'll keep them alive until it does," Elias said. "And if it doesn't, maybe someone will remember that I tried." She didn't understand this man. He didn't beg, didn't scream, didn't even try to bargain. He just kept healing, even while death hovered around them. Varexa turned to leave, but paused at the entrance. "Your actions confuse me, doctor," she said without turning, "but they will not be forgotten." "I don't need them to be," he answered, wiping blood from his fingers. "But thank you." That night, no more attacks came to the ruined hospital the order had come from. The top Varexa herself, the healer, was not to be touched. And her soldiers began to whisper, a strange, dangerous thought, that perhaps not all humans were monsters. That maybe, just maybe, one man's kindness was more powerful than war. The next day. The sky remained heavy with ash, but the bombs didn't fall. In the middle of the war-torn city, the silence felt louder than thunder. Elias woke to a weak cry and rushed to the child he had treated the night before. "It's all right, little one," he whispered, pressing 2 fingers to her neck, checking her pulse. The girl, barely 6, clung to his sleeve with trembling hands. He gave her a soft smile, the kind only someone who had lost everything could still offer. The rest of the shelter stirred slowly, humans and even 2 injured aliens who dared not move. Elias worked without pause, wiping sweat from his forehead as he stitched wounds and passed out what little water they had, each time his hands brushed a torn bandage or a fevered brow. Something inside him whispered, "Keep going, even if no one came to help, even if death returned." He had made a promise to himself not to give up outside the ruins. Zelthari soldiers stood guard not to destroy, but to watch. They had orders from their general. No one was to interfere with the healer. No harm was to come to the shelter, but no one understood why. Not even Virexa herself, back aboard her flagship. She stared at a holographic map of Earth. The rest of the planet still fought back with rage and fear. But here, in this broken human city, one man had changed everything, with no weapons at all. She tapped her clawed fingers against the console. She couldn't stop thinking about his words. "Maybe someone will remember that I tried." She remembered, and it disturbed her more than any battlefield wound ever had. One of her captains approached, saluted, and hesitated. "Speak," Virexa commanded, her voice low. The human. "Dr. Elias. He was seen giving water to one of our wounded, and he asked for nothing in return." The general's eyes narrowed. "Did the warrior live?" "Yes, General." "And what did he say?" "He said." The human touched him without fear. Virexa turned away, her mind racing. Fear was her weapon, her shield, her entire identity. Yet this man walked through flames, spoke gently to enemies, and showed no fear. She clenched her fists, unsure if she hated him or envied him. Later that night, when the stars returned behind drifting smoke, Virexa made a decision that shocked her command. She left the ship alone again, without guards, without weapons. She walked through the quiet ruins, stepping carefully over broken glass and charred beams, and once again, she found him, sitting beside a fire made from shattered furniture, holding a child in his arms. The girl had stopped crying. Resting her head on his chest, Elias looked up, surprised, but not afraid. "You came back," he said simply. Virexa nodded slowly, her voice softer this time. "I wanted to understand." Elias gently placed the sleeping child down and stood. "What is it you want to understand?" "You," she said. "You confuse me." "Good," he replied. "Confusion is the start of thinking." That made her pause. No soldier had ever dared speak to her like that, and lived. But she didn't raise her claws. She listened. "Why? Do you help your enemy?" She asked again. "I don't see an enemy," he said. "I see life that's hurting, and I help where I can. But they would kill you." "Maybe," Elias said. "But maybe one of them won't, because I helped first." Virexa stared into the fire, the orange light reflecting in her violet eyes. She remembered her first war. Remembered blood, screams, victory, and silence. She had crushed every voice that spoke against her. But now she found herself wanting to listen. "Is kindness your weapon?" she asked. "No," he said, with a small laugh. "It's just who I am." The general sat down across from him, surprising them both. "Then maybe I need to learn your way," she said quietly, for the first time. Elias saw something in her face that wasn't made of war. He saw regret, maybe even loneliness, and beneath all the metal, muscle. And pride, he saw a woman searching for something. She couldn't name. The fire crackled between them. Neither spoke for a while. Around them, humans and aliens watched from the shadows. Silent witnesses to something they didn't yet understand. Not a treaty, not surrender, not friendship, but something smaller, stranger, and more powerful. A conversation between enemies. And in that moment, something shifted, not just in the war, but in the hearts of those who heard it. Elias never expected a war zone to feel peaceful, but by the third night, something strange had settled in. The air was still heavy with smoke, the buildings still broken, yet inside the ruined hospital. Enemies were no longer enemies, a human. Child offered bread to a Zelthari scout with trembling hands. And the scout, stunned, accepted it, nodding in silence. Two species who had once fired at each other now shared food and quiet glances. And at the center of it all sat Elias, wrapping bandages with the same care he gave to both sides. But something darker was approaching. Far above Earth's orbit, Zelthari High Command had noticed the pause in Sector 12. The general's orders to hold fire had raised questions. And when questions reached those with rank and fear, answers often came in the form of threats. A transmission came through in the middle of the night. Varexa answered it alone, standing before the glowing blue screen. The face of Supreme Marshal. Krex appeared, his voice cold as ice. General Varexa. Explained why your sector has gone silent. She kept her posture strong, her tone steady. There is an opportunity here, she said. A new path. One that may end this war, end. Krex barked. We do not end wars, we win them. The humans are not what we thought. She replied, some fight, yes, but others. Others heal. The weak always have tricks. The Marshal hissed, this human healer. He clouds your judgment. He has saved Zelthari lives. Varexa growled. He has shown honor. Krex leaned forward, his voice turning sharp. You were not bred for honor. You were forged for conquest, if you do not crush the humans. We will replace you with someone who will. The screen went dark. Varexa stood there for several seconds, her claws flexing at her sides. She was not afraid of punishment. She was afraid of losing the only thing in years that had made her feel again. At sunrise, she went to see Elias. He was sitting outside, stitching together 2 blankets for a child who had none. When he saw her face, he knew something had changed. What happened? He asked gently. Command knows, she said. They want blood. Elias nodded slowly. That's what they always want. I've delayed them, but they're sending a new ship to watch me. He looked into her eyes, not with fear, but concern. Will they kill you? They may try, she said, but I won't let them touch you. That line caught him off guard. Not because it was fierce, but because it sounded personal. Why? He asked. I don't know, she admitted, but the way you hold life, protect it, even when you gain nothing. It makes me think about what I've become. Elias placed the blanket aside and stood up. You're not just a soldier, he said. You're someone who can choose. Varexa looked down at her hands that had crushed cities, torn through walls, and commanded death. Could they now protect something instead? The moment was broken by the roar of engines. A new Zelthari dropship descended from the sky, darker and heavier than hers. It belonged to the Executioners, a class of enforcers sent only when command questioned loyalty. Her soldiers stiffened. Drawing into formation, Elias felt the mood shift instantly. From peace to panic in a heartbeat. A massive figure stepped out of the ship, Commander Drecht. A brutal tactician known for his cruelty. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. The message was clear. He was here to take over or take heads. Varexa stepped forward before anyone else could move. You are not needed here. Commander, she said firmly. I will decide that, Drecht sneered. Scanning the area, his eyes landed on Elias, and he snarled. A human walks among us. This is the peace you offer." Elias didn't back away. He looked direct in the eye and said, "I've saved 6 of your own. Ask them if they'd prefer I hadn't." One of the Zelthari soldiers stepped forward and saluted. "The human saved my life, Commander." He even sang while removing a plasma shard from my leg. Another added quietly, "I would be dead without him." The executioner hesitated, but only for a moment. He turned to Virexa and hissed, "You have 3 days to prove this human is worth the delay." After that, I resumed the assault. The tension faded only slightly as he walked back to his ship. Elias turned to Virexa, his voice calm but clear. "3 days isn't long, no," she said, "but it's enough." As the fire crackled again that night, the healer and the warlord sat closer than they had before. They said little, but both were thinking the same thing. This fragile peace would not last, but maybe. Love could begin where war once ruled. The rain began without warning. Dark clouds rolled in over the broken skyline as if the planet itself sensed the danger ahead. Thunder echoed across the cracked concrete and lightning flashed over the ruins. But inside the shelter, no one moved a nod because of the storm, but because of what tomorrow might bring. Elias sat beside a cracked window, staring into the downpour. He wasn't thinking about the war, the enemy, or even survival. He was thinking about her, Virexa, the alien general who had once promised to conquer Earth. Now, she came each night. Not with soldiers, but with silence and questions. That night, she sat beside him again, soaked from the rain. Her armored chestplate steaming where heat met cold. Neither of them spoke for a long time. They just listened to the storm, and for the first time in weeks. Elias felt something almost like calm. "I used to believe feelings were a weakness," she said finally, her voice low. Elias glanced at her, surprised. "And now?" "I'm still afraid they are," she replied, "but I can't ignore them anymore." She looked at him not as prey, not as an obstacle, but as something unfamiliar and dangerous in a new way. Something that reached inside her without force. He offered nothing but honesty, and that was the strangest power of all. "I've killed people," she said suddenly. "Hundreds, maybe thousands." "I know," Elias said gently. "But you're here now, trying to save instead." Virexa looked down at her clawed hands. "I don't know if I deserve that chance." Elias reached out slowly, placing his hand on hers. It was small compared to hers, softer, but steady. "Then let this be the first time you take it anyway," he whispered. The door burst open with a loud crash. One of Virexa's scouts entered, breathless, eyes wide. "General, the executioner is preparing an orbital strike on this zone." Virexa stood instantly, fury flashing across her face. "They dare challenge my command." She growled. Elias stepped forward, then stopped them. He said, "Don't wait, lead." She didn't answer. She turned and stormed out into the rain, her armor lighting with energy. Her soldiers followed without question. Even the humans inside the shelter watched in silence. Sensing the storm inside her was far greater than the one above, Virexa reached the landing zone just as Drecht was preparing the coordinates. He stood atop his ship, shouting orders to load. The orbital cannon, her voice cut through the wind like a blade. "Stand down, Commander." Drecht turned. Unimpressed, "You were given 3 days," he growled. "And what have you proven?" "That you've gone soft." "I've proven that fear doesn't make loyalty," she shouted. "But respect can." He stepped down from the platform, towering over her. "Then show me strength," he said, "or die." The challenge was ancient. Among the Zelthari, it could not be refused. It was not a duel for pride. It was for command itself. Virexa removed her gauntlets and stepped forward. Rain poured over them both, hissing off armor. She didn't roar or raise her claws. She simply waited, steady as stone. Drecht struck first, fast and brutal, but she had fought longer, harder, and smarter. She dodged, twisted, and slammed her elbow into his chest. Cracking his armor, the soldiers gasped, human and alien alike, watching a legend reclaim her throne. It wasn't just a fight, it was a declaration. That peace was not weakness. That love was not surrender. With one final strike, Virexa knocked Drekt to the ground. She stood over him, breathing hard, but victorious. I do not fight for power anymore. She growled, I fight for choice. She turned to the soldiers, soaked and silent. No more bombs, she ordered. No more fire. This healer showed me what our empire forgot: compassion. They didn't cheer. They didn't salute. But they obeyed. And that meant everything. Elias stepped out into the rain, his eyes meeting hers. She walked toward him slowly, bruised but proud. You defied your whole empire. He said, I would defy the galaxy, she replied, if it meant one more night by your fire. And then, in front of humans and aliens alike, Virexa did something no one had ever seen her do. She knelt not in defeat, but in choice, before the man who taught her how to feel again. The galaxy spun on, unaware that something sacred had been born in a pile of ruins. Not a treaty, not surrender, but trust built from pain, watered by rain, and rooted in the quiet between battles. Elias didn't sleep much that night. He sat near the dying fire, staring at his hands. These same hands had once trembled when holding a scalpel. Now they held the fragile threads of peace between two worlds. Virexa returned from her command tent before dawn. Her armor was still scratched from the duel with Drekt, but her eyes were different, less shadowed, more clear. She sat beside Elias. Without speaking, they didn't need words now. Not for silence like this, but the silence didn't last. A young human boy, maybe 12, stepped into the room holding a datapad. His hands were shaking, his voice small. Mr. Elias. There's a broadcast. Elias took the pad and watched the screen light up. It was a message from Earth's Defense Council. Static filled the first few seconds. Then, a voice came through. This is Commander Reese of Terrafleet, to all surviving units. The aliens have paused their advance in Sector 12. Elias froze. Everyone around him listened, including the injured Zelthari lying nearby. Reese continued, we don't know why, but we believe it's connected to a civilian named Dr. Elias Ford. Virex's eyes flicked toward him. She could hear the shift in tone, respect laced with suspicion. Reese's voice continued, Doctor, if you can hear this, your actions may have given us a window. We need you to come to orbit. Elias's heart thudded in his chest. The Council wanted to talk, not fight, not run, but talk. He looked at Virexa, unsure what to say. She stood slowly, her voice careful. This is your chance, human. I don't want to leave this, he said. You, them. This peace must spread or it dies, she replied. Take the seed you've planted and show them it can grow within hours. A small human dropship descended into the city. Its engines cut through the silence as it landed. Between broken buildings, Virexa stood beside Elias as the ramp opened, revealing to human soldiers and a pale man in a black coat. Dr. Ford. The man asked, stepping forward. I'm Agent Morrow. I'm here to escort you. Elias nodded, but as he moved toward the ramp, he felt Virex's clawed hand brush his wrist. He turned, and for a long second, they just looked at each other. Not general and doctor, not alien and human. Just two people whose hearts had collided in the middle of chaos. You taught me how to stop bleeding, she said quietly. But what will I do now that you're leaving? He smiled. Then let me show them the cure too. She nodded once, then stepped back as he boarded the ship. In orbit, Elias was led through steel corridors filled with tension. Commanders stared at him like a puzzle. Scientists followed, like shadows, when he finally reached the central war room. He was stunned to find more than just humans. On screen were delegates from other alien species, some allies. Most afraid, Elias was given no chair, just a mic. He didn't panic, didn't prepare, he just spoke. "You sent me here to survive," he said, "but I found something more. I found a woman born to destroy, learning how to heal. I found alien soldiers giving food to human children. I found hope buried under fire." But still alive, the council remained still, some confused, others deeply moved. One older ambassador leaned forward and asked, "And do you believe this General Varexa would speak for her empire?" "No," Elias answered, "but she speaks for herself, and that is where real change begins." His words rippled across the system, not just in official meetings, but on back channels and civilian broadcasts. People across Earth and alien colonies began sharing clips of Elias tending to injured aliens, of Varexa walking beside humans, unarmed. Something was shifting. He could feel it, and he wasn't alone, back on Earth. Varexa stood before her troops. She didn't give a speech. She simply walked into the human side of the city and began helping, carrying water, lifting rubble, pressing cloth to wounds. She did what Elias had taught her, without needing his presence, because now his kindness lived in her actions too. The stars above Earth shimmered like cold witnesses. But for the first time in generations, they weren't watching a world falling apart. They were watching a world pausing, one heartbeat held between war and something new. Elias stood at the observation deck of the orbital station, below him. Earth turned slowly, clouds rolling across continents scorched by battles. Behind him, diplomats argued, generals whispered, and politicians shifted in their chairs. But Elias? He stayed quiet. He wasn't trained for politics. He wasn't born for speeches. But his voice had reached hearts where weapons had failed. A voice buzzed over the intercom. "Doctor, your transmission is ready." He stepped into the chamber, heart pounding not with fear, but with weight. Because this call wasn't going out to humans alone. Across the galaxy, the Zelthari homeworld opened its comms. Every soldier, officer, and even the Empress herself would be watching, and beside the Earth Council leaders sat a screen where General Varexa had just appeared. Standing in her ruined city, proud and unflinching, Elias smiled when he saw her. She didn't smile back, but her eyes softened. The same eyes that once saw him as prey now saw something far deeper. The broadcast began, and Elias spoke, not to prove anything, not to beg, but to tell the truth. "I am Elias Ford," he said, "and I am just one man. I've never held a rifle, never taken a life, but I have held the hand of a dying alien and felt it grip back. I've treated warriors who once swore to destroy us, and I've seen them cry like children." He paused, his voice steady. "We were told the Zelthari are monsters, but I met their fiercest general, and she gave up conquest to carry water to our wounded." Whispers erupted across both sides of the galaxy. Varexa didn't flinch. She let his words spread like light through fog. "I don't ask for surrender," Elias continued. "I ask for permission. To heal instead of hurt, to build instead of bury." Then he said something no one expected. "Let me return to her." Gasps filled the room. One Earth commander stood in shock. "You would go back?" "Alone? I was never alone down there," Elias replied. "And if she can change, then maybe the rest of us can too." Varexa watched from her end. She didn't blink, didn't move, but in her chest, something warm and sharp bloomed. This human had stood before all powers of Earth and galaxy, alike, and chosen her. Later that evening, a message arrived on her terminal, one line, sent from a high-ranking Zelthari counselor. "We are watching. General, show us this peace you believe in." Varexa stared at it for a long time, then looked up to the stars. Then come see it with your own eyes, she whispered, 3 days later. A neutral zone was established. A cratered valley between human and alien territory was cleared, and from both sides, envoys began to arrive, not with weapons, but with eyes wide open. At the center stood Elias and Virexa. Side by side, he wore simple robes, dirt-stained and soft. She wore battle armor with the helmet off, exposed, defiant, proud. A human girl walked forward with a bundle of flowers. She stopped in front of Virexa, arms trembling. Everyone held their breath. But Virexa knelt slowly and took the flowers. With both hands, "Thank you," she said, in human tongue. And the crowd exhaled as if the galaxy had taken a breath. Later that night, Elias sat beside her on a rocky hill. The stars reflected in a pool of rainwater. "Do you think this will last?" He asked. "I don't know," she answered, "but I will fight for it." He looked at her claws, once meant for killing, resting gently over his hand. "Then maybe you've become the galaxy's first healer general." She didn't laugh, but her silence said enough. The war hadn't ended, not yet. But something greater had begun, and no one, no empire, no command, no fear could stop it now. It began with silence, not the silence of death or fear, but the kind of silence that follows a storm, where the air is heavy, the soil still damp, and the world waits to see what grows next. On the edge of the neutral zone, a small outpost had risen. It wasn't a fortress or a temple. It was something stranger, half human, half Zelthari, built not of steel but of trust. Children from both species played in the dusty courtyard. Human engineers taught alien soldiers how to purify water. Zelthari medics, once feared for their cruelty, now handed out bandages and fresh fruit. And in the middle of it all stood the woman who had once led fleets of destruction, Virexa. She no longer wore full armor, just the chestplate, stripped of rank markings. Her claws were dull, now not by force, but by choice. And when people looked at her, they didn't flinch, they bowed, not in fear, but in respect. Elias walked beside her, his long coat stained with dust, his stubble unshaved. But his smile was brighter than any sun above the clouds. He had returned, not as a hero, not as a symbol, but simply as himself, the healer, the man who looked at war and saw wounds that needed kindness. Today was the ceremony, not a treaty, not a celebration of victory, but something new. The declaration of understanding. Across the outpost, benches were set. Flags of both worlds flapped side by side, and in front of everyone, Virexa was asked to speak. She stood at the center stage, claws behind her back, voice firm. "I was trained to destroy." She began to lead through fear, to conquer without question. "I thought that made me strong." She paused, eyes scanning the crowd, soldiers, civilians, children, diplomats. But I was wrong. She turned toward Elias, who stood off to the side with his hands folded. "Strength is not what I had," she said. "It's what he showed me. True strength is healing when everything inside you is still bleeding. It is choosing peace even when vengeance screams louder." A murmur swept through the crowd. Some wept, others nodded. Even the hardened warriors from both species looked down at their hands, wondering what they might now become. Virexa continued. "I am no longer your general," she said. "I am your student, and this human, this healer's my teacher." Elias stepped forward when she finished. He said only one sentence, and yet it echoed across systems. "We are not the same, but we all bleed red." The crowd rose in silent agreement, not clapping, not cheering, just standing, because sometimes the loudest support is the quietest. After the ceremony, Virexa and Elias returned to the hill where they had first watched the stars together. The wind carried the scent of wet stone and blooming moss. Elias lay back against a rock, arms behind his head. "So," he said with a grin, Did you ever imagine this? A day without war, she asked. No, he said. A day with flowers in your claws. She looked down, smiling at the delicate purple bloom a child had given her. No, Elias, she said. That's something I never prepared for. They sat in peace as dusk wrapped the outpost in golden light. Above them, 2 moons crossed slowly. The universe kept moving. But for once, they weren't chasing it. They were part of it. And when Virexa leaned her head on his shoulder, he didn't flinch. He closed his eyes, letting the moment hold them both. No weapons, no orders, just warmth, just peace. The galaxy would remember the wars, the fleets, the flames. But in time, it would also remember this, the day the fiercest general gave up her sword and found her heart in the hands of a human.